Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. My name is Khadijah Ali-Coleman. I really am excited about you joining us today for another speaker in our series for our inaugural virtual teach-in. This speaker today is someone who I have had the pleasure of having a friendship with now for, oh my goodness, it has to be at least 10 years.
Yeah.
At least 10 years. We actually met online. We've been part of different online spaces. We're in different states. She's in Boston. I'm in Maryland. But we've really maintained. I can say she's probably one of my favorite connections that I've met online, and definitely one of the longest lasting. And we actually came together around our children and talking about, I think she reached out to me and asked me about independent schools that were in the area, and we started talking about that because I actually went to a Pan-African independent school as a child, and we just started sharing stuff. And so there was a period of time that we homeschooled at the same time, but our children both of our children have done both homeschooling and a traditional school setting, whether it's public or private school. So she definitely had to be part of this. And she's always so amenable whenever I'm reaching out to her for something. I'm always bothering her because she's an amazing writer as well. And so that's also a lot of our communication. We've collaborated artistically in different ways. And so without further ado, I'm going to allow her to tell you her name and a little bit about her homeschooling journey, and then move into the question that she's going to answer that's related to our teaching. So.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tichaona Chinyelu. I'm a mother of a 16-year-old boy. I started homeschooling him in what would have been his 4th grade school year. Okay, let me start back. We moved to this this town called Brookline, and that's where he started elementary school at. And Brookline has a reputation as like a really good public school environment, education, and all of that. And it's kind of sought after. But me, I didn't want to go there. So when we moved to Brookline and he started school there, that's when I started researching homeschooling, because I didn't want him to be educated by the liberal races here in Boston, in Brookline. So he started, and then one of his teachers suggested that he go see a psychiatrist, because he had shared some family information about his dad, which alarmed her, I guess, and that's what she figured would be the solution. So I said no, because he was just like 6 or 7 at that point, and I was like, that's just crazy. And she was like, well, my son goes, and I was like, I didn't verbalize this, but I'm like, that's scary. And then towards the end of the school year, that first year, his teacher or somebody overheard him talking to another kid, and he said, my mom spanks me. And that triggered a DCFS investigation. So I pulled him out of that school, and then it was this whole situation. They're like, are you going to send him to another Brookline school? And I was like, oh, I guess so. So he went to another one, and that one, it was like, it was a little bit more, like Brookline is it's surrounded by Boston on 3 sides, but it's a town, and it's a little bit urban and it's a little bit suburban. So the first school was more suburban, and the second school was a little bit more urban. And I don't mean as a metaphor for Black people, because they're not really there in Brookline. So, yeah, and then okay. Midway through the first half of the school year, I went to pick him up from school. This was near winter, and they have a program where they offer kids coats. And I was like, and I walked up to see him, and his teacher's holding a coat. And if you know me, I might not say anything to you, but my face speaks to me. And I saw the coat, and I saw him, and my face immediately changed. And I was like, we don't want that. And she was like, well, it came from the guidance counselor. And I was like, okay, you have to go talk to the guidance counselor to get to say no to the coat. So I go talk to the guidance counselor, and I tell her, unless I directly ask you, don't offer something to my child, and don't do it in the classroom in front of all the other students, you know. And I was like, so that was that. And then he went on. He had problems reading. A 7-year-old had problems reading. So they tried to put him in special ed, and I said, no, just give it time. He's only 7. He'll learn how to read, you know. And eventually he did. By the time we left school ed, he was 9, and he was reading above his grade level. So so they did something good, but it was like the race thing won, but then in the whole class thing, because Brookline is very wealthy, it's very, very wealthy. I mean, they have mansions and stuff. So that was it. And like I said, I never wanted to live in Brookline in the first place. It was like, that was the only place that accepted Section 8 in the whole greater Boston area. So I was like, okay. So we moved, and then I was like, we're gonna move to Cambridge, because this is just ridiculous, you know. I mean, he would come home crying, saying he's so dumb. One time, we had like a situation where another kid, an Asian kid, told my child that his skin looked like poop. And I was like, you know, and they were trying to explain that this kid was just a kid and he didn't understand. But I'm like, he could pick something else. He could pick chocolate, he could pick earth, he could pick something positive about brownness, but he picked poop. That's a choice, you know. Even though he's a little kid, that's still a choice, you know. So I was like, we need to move. So we moved to Cambridge, and I was like, okay. Well, Cambridge is like, has a reputation as a kind of, what would be the word? I don't want to say counterculture. It's a counterculture type of town. It still has that vibe somewhat from the 60s. So I figured it might be a little bit better, like might be a little bit freer, because I remember when I lived here in the 80s in Cambridge, it had a good vibe. So I figured that might be a little bit better, but I was wrong, you know. Oh, one thing I also want to say about Brookline, because this situation still disturbs me to this day. There was another Black kid who was a classmate of Sankara's, and him and Sankara got really close. I mean, to the point that even now, even though they haven't seen each other in years, Sankara still remembers him. They took this little kid out of the classroom, made some kind of prison cell, for lack of a better word, in the hallway that locked from the outside so he couldn't get out, and they kept him in there all day, you know. And I became friends with his mother, and I'm like, and she's telling me horror stories about how they put him in a psychiatric hospital, and they did all this, and I'm like, why would you put up with this? And she's like, Brookline schools, the reputation and all of this. And I'm like, sis, the damage you're doing to your child by allowing them to do this to him, you know? And it's like, no, you know. And
can I just ask a question? When you said they put him in psychiatric hospital, this was after the whole
I think it was before.
Gotcha.
Like, in order for him to come back to school, he had to be separated from the other students, and this is how they figured out how to do it.
Wow.
You know? So, after I pulled him out of the first school, that's when she stopped talking to me, and she stopped allowing Sam to talk to the boy. But, you know, it's just like, that was part of the reason also why I moved, because I was like, if I don't, who knows how Sankara would end up when he's, you know, end up with all kinds of neuroses. So we moved, and Cambridge is a little bit better because there's more people of color. There's some anti-colonial sentiment out there in the city. So it's a little tiny bit easier, but it's still Massachusetts. So, okay, third grade, I did not like his teacher. She was like one of those liberal racist women, white women. And but I put up with it because I was like, okay, that's fine. 4th grade, I liked his teacher a lot better. She was trained. She wasn't trained. She grew up as a Montessori student. And when I walked into the room and I met her, I just felt a good vibe. So I was like, even though she was white, I figured, okay, I can leave my child safely with her. And she was cool, you know. But then at the end of 4th grade, his 3rd grade teacher called me. I remember I was telling you this, his 3rd grade teacher called me to try to get him in what they call an IEP. And I was like, and I was asking, I was like, isn't that tracking? And she was like, she's just hemmed and hawed, and no, it's not really, but kind of, sort of. And I was like, and then she finally admitted that you can, as a parent, you have the authority to say yes or no. And if you say no, it's no. So I said, no. You know, then the principal called me because it's also the class thing. And I guess she wanted to figure out if I had something she could use class-wise, you know, like if I was a Harvard graduate or I went to MIT, and she was trying to pick my brains and find out how, you know. And I was like, no, I'm just, you know, I don't have a college degree. I'm just intelligent, you know. And then so after, I think it was 5th through 8th grade that I homeschooled him. So after 4th grade, I was like, that's enough. Let's just chill and figure it out and do it. And we started homeschooling. It was hard at first because I was trying to mimic the traditional model where you have subject, 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 subject. And it wasn't working for me, and it wasn't working for him. It was stressing me out because he wasn't receptive, and I was like, so then we discovered about unschooling. And that's when we started doing unschooling, and I let him pretty much design his own curriculum, even though it was very loose. It wasn't structured at all. And then we went like that for 3 years, and then what would have been the winter of his 8th grade, he said he wanted the winter vacation. He said he wanted to go back to school. I was like, "Are you sure?" And he was like, "Yeah," because it's in Boston, as a Black parent, it's very isolating because a lot of Black people here do not homeschool because the schools, even though the schools are very problematic, they still have a reputation as being good. So
during that period where you were homeschooling, I recall like you were engaged in starting a lot of things or doing things. In particular, you migrated a popular Yahoo homeschooling group to Facebook. Can you tell a little bit about that and what motivated you to do that?
Well, one of the things is that a lot of the homeschool group is called African American Single Parent Homeschooling. And I liked that idea, even though I didn't create the group. I like that idea because a lot of times when you deal with homeschooling, it's married couples and they have resources and they have circles, and it's very, what's that word? Nuclear family-ish. So the idea of single parents really resonated with me, and I joined the Yahoo group. But it wasn't very active and it wasn't very dynamic. So I would pay attention, even though I was a moderator, I wouldn't really give it too much energy. And then I got on Facebook and I was like, let me transfer the group over to Facebook. So we did that, and it seems like it's much more better now. I'm no longer a moderator. I had turned it over to Phyllis, I think, and then she turned it over to somebody else, a sister named Phyllis, and now it's what it is. But it's much better than on Yahoo.
So that, I would say that, you're very modest, and, I transitioned. But when you were active with it, because you invited me to be part of that group, and you were always sharing, even now, that Sankara has transitioned. I want you to talk about what that has been for you, that transition of him back to school, but you still share and you still interact, and you know, when you come across something, you still will share it with the group, even though that's not where you are right now. And I get the sense that, you know, once a homeschooling parent, always a homeschooling parent, even if, you know, the situation may look a bit different, the child may have returned to a traditional schooling situation. So can you talk a little bit about that? I know that, you know, I love your child. I think he's a brilliant Black boy, and definitely a science-minded person. Can you talk about that transition from homeschooling to a traditional setting? What are some of those things that were kind of grown during homeschooling that you still see influencing how he is as a student in a traditional setting?
Oh, okay. Well, Sankara, since he was like a toddler, has always been like a problem solver, and he still has that ability. He's looked at among his friends. I think he's looked at as a kind of informal leader, in that he has smart advice to offer them, and he's not like just run of the mill, running around. I want to be in a gang, or I want to whatever, you know. And there's that. But I do have to say that my method of parenting is like, I want to raise a free thinker. So he free thought his way into going back to school, which I don't agree with and don't like, but it's not my life, you know. So that, and did I answer your question?
I think didn't he have a certain argument as to why he needed to go back to school because of the curriculum? It was geared, because isn't he doing math and a certain like robotics? I feel like that was what you you shared, that it was an argument as to why this school in particular.
Right. It was mainly the social thing, I think, because he felt very isolated, because as I said, there's not a lot of other Black families homeschooling, and if they do, it's more like a private, their family thing. It's not really into cooperative. And I think he felt really isolated and alone and wanted friends. I think that was a big, big thing. He wanted friends.
So having this experience inside a public school system, and now and homeschooling for a while, and now he transitions back. As you look back, and especially now with you really being resistant to this, but being respectful of this being his choice, but looking back on your homeschooling experience, what is something that you feel that homeschooling Black families need most in order to be successful as homeschooling families?
Community, cooperatives, things of that nature. We need more the social aspect. We need to connect more. I think that would be number one.
And it sounds like you don't mean just for the children, definitely for the children, but also you talk a lot about how he was isolated. Did you feel isolated as well, even, you know, with your digital community? Do you see a homeschooling cooperative in real lifetime would have been helpful for you as a support?
I think it definitely would. It definitely would have helped. But the thing is that Boston itself as a city is pretty isolating anyway for me, you know, and I think it would have helped, but I don't think it would have been a solution for me, because I really don't like it.
You said, I didn't hear you. You really don't like
it? I said, because I really don't like it here.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think
it's so interesting, because with the few people that that I've interviewed already, it's a few who have lived in at some point predominantly white environments, and spoken to how that has impacted their homeschooling experience. And by far, that makes a difference in terms of just, if it's just the child being able to go outside and play and interact with children that are like, that have some type of, and it's not even always about they're Black like me, but just have some type of shared experience.
Right.
And so I feel that that's very interesting in how it impacts the success of our homeschooling journey. Would you say that your homeschooling journey, even though it was brief, do you look at it as being a success?
Oh yes. Oh yes, because part of the reason I also did that was because I wanted my child to know his own mind and be familiar with himself and his thought process and be confident with that before the outside world says you're nothing but whatever they think you are.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have that, and I feel like I succeeded with that.
And it sounds like there clearly is a before and after with your experiences that you spoke of them trying to track him, to pigeonhole him in this IEP, to, stereotyping him as being in need and giving him unsolicited gifts, to classmates telling him negative things about characteristics about what he looks like and who he is, moving from those experiences to the child that I know of now who's like that, what? Like,
right.
What? I definitely would agree with you that homeschooling has definitely been a success. And I'm sure you have seen that this child is his mama's child, definitely.
Oh, yes.
But, I feel like even as you speak of him struggling with of accepting this transition school-wise, I think that speaks a lot too, because he expects more from what he's learning. So he has this high expectation that if you're my teacher, then it should be a higher caliber of learning.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that you actually have an experience that folks want to hear, particularly parents who, both of us, when we're in the Facebook groups and we see other parents post, I've seen a couple of times of parents just frantic because they feel like it's not working, or the child is saying, I want to go back to school, and deeming that as a failure because that they are immediately personalizing it, that if the child wants to go back to school, then something must be wrong with me. But I really appreciate your whole mindset around this is his choice. My goal with homeschooling was for him to have his own mind and to be self-guided. So if this is something that he's saying he wants, then that's his decision. And I think that that's really that's a higher level of thinking that it's not common when we think of our role as parents. A lot of people don't hold that because he's still a child. He's he's still under your care, and to give him that level of ability to direct his own life as a high school student, a lot of parents aren't willing to go that route. Do you have another speaker that I interviewed said that was saying that our goal should not be for our children to live out our dreams for them. And it sounds like you're actualizing that you want him, your goal is for him to have his own goals, for him to have his own mind. Are there any things that he was really into and that you were helping him kind of facilitate when you were homeschooling, that you still see him trying to do or engaged in or interested in while he's in a traditional school setting?
Like computer stuff, fixing stuff. Like he fixed the Xbox, my Xbox, which was broken. I don't know what he did, but he fixed it and now it's working. And building things, he's 2 summers ago, he had a summer job and he used his money, his paycheck, to get himself a bike, and he's been working on that bike and upgrading it and things like that. So yeah, definitely.
Oh, wow.
It hasn't all, he hasn't lost it yet.
That's awesome.
Hopefully not.
So much for just sharing. Allow me to ask more than the one question I said I was going to ask you. But I really appreciate you sharing with the audience that there is life after homeschooling, that that the child may sometimes want to go back to a traditional school setting, and that by no means that the homeschooling experience was a failure. In fact, that in many ways strengthens the experience that they're going to have when they return to a traditional school setting. So thank you so much, Tichaona. I appreciate you immensely. And for those who are watching today, I really encourage you to jump into the conversations that we're going to have on Friday regarding the 3 guiding questions that we are asking our speakers during this teach-in. So just as a reminder, our teach-in takes place this week from Friday, July 20th to, Monday, July 20th to Friday, July 24th. From the 20th to the 23rd, we're sharing with you different interviews with our speakers, our various speakers, and as well as other resources regarding homeschooling. And then on Friday, we will be meeting virtually and have breakout groups where we will discuss many of the topics that our speakers have brought up during the course of the week. Thank you so much for joining us. For more information on Black family home educators and scholars, please visit us at blackfamilyhomeschool.org. Thank you.